Hey everyone, good evening. Welcome to day 5 session of PRINCE2 certification training. I see everyone is online. I'm a bit late, couple of minutes. Sorry for that, I got stuck in traffic. If you have any questions from yesterday's discussion, we can take it at the end of this session together with today's questions. Alright, so today's topic is processes. Even before talking about PRINCE2 process, let's talk about process in general. Alright, so what is a process? What is a process? So what is a process? What is a process? Anyone?
A procedure for
Step.
completion task. Right?
Sorry? Sujit, please tell me.
Yeah, it could be step-by-step actions to achieve some objective.
Step by step action to achieve an objective. Okay? More?
A procedure or a workflow to achieve a task.
Procedural workflow. Okay? Yeah. All right. So, well, step-by-step action, procedural workflow. These are a part of processes. Well, it could be also called as simple, standard operating procedures, SOPs, or maybe a checklist, or workflow. Workflow itself, as you said, workflow is not a process, by the way. It's a part of a process. It's not a process by itself. Or maybe a simple task list. Right. The process is something little little different, not different, it is little more comprehensive, these things. I'll take an example to make it simple. Let me take a non-IT example, which is, I'll take an example of, let's say, let's talk about example of a check clearance, a banking process, check clearance. All right, you're all aware of it, right? So that's easy to do it. Let's say Samir wants to clear a check. So this is you, Samir, and you want to clear a check which is $1 million US dollars. Okay. If you have that money, I don't think you'll be sitting in PRINCE2 class, by the way. All right, and you also you also submit a requisite form, check requisite form with your signature. There'll be a one person in the counter, maybe a teller. Okay, he gets your check, gives your number, asks you to sit somewhere, and because it's 1 million, he will forward it to a manager who will verify that, and there will be a transaction guy who will be doing the transaction. The check will hit your debit account, and then you have a cashier guy who will call your number and give you cash. So you might need a truck to actually carry that cash. It's 1 million bucks. All right, so this is a process, isn't it? So tell me, why all of a sudden this process has started? Right, you have this process being started here. So how this process started? What is the trigger for this process? What is the trigger for this process? Anyone?
Amount of money.
Yeah, not the amount of money, but what is the trigger for this process? Why this teller guy all of a sudden started working? And how this process has started? So what triggered the process? It's very simple. It's basically your request to encash the check. A request from the customer to encash the check triggered this process, isn't it? This is an event-based trigger. Event-based trigger. You also have a time-triggered processes. Can anyone tell me what is a example of a time triggered process, which is a scheduled process or a time triggered process, one and the same.
Credit card bill payments.
Credit card bill payment or any invoice, postpaid bills, right? You have even more important process, most important process in your life, your payroll processing. That's how you get your salary, isn't it? It's a time triggered process. All right. So this in process theory, we call this as a first element trigger. All right, first element. And the second element is your inputs. So we say defined inputs. There should be a valid check under requisite form, really valid, to properly run this process as per expected, right? If you don't provide a valid check, there will be a different process, which is, you don't want to get into that process. But if you have defined inputs with a valid check and a process to actually execute this process as expected, this is your second aspect of the project, second element of the project, inputs. Okay, and then you have a bunch of connected activities, a series of activities, or you, as Samir or Suji said, step-by-step action to achieve an objective, or a procedural workflow. All right, workflow, that we call it as 3. And the fourth is your output. An output should be given to a specified stakeholder or an entity. This output can be also an input for another process or a trigger for another process. It should be clearly defined where is this output going. All right. If Samir asks for a 1 million and I come and collect and go away with the money, I don't think it's the proper process. It should be clearly defined which entity or a stakeholder this particular output is actually going. Right. We also have other elements, but these are the 4 important elements of a process. We also have other elements, like you have, how this activity is being carried out, who is doing it. Right? You have people with the right skills in right positions or authorities, with right, work instructions, carrying out these things, right? Right processes or right work instructions. People is very important to carry out these activities. And then you have your hardware or IT infrastructure, hardware, servers, and the applications running. All these things are necessary to carry out this process, work activity as per it is expected. We call these are enabling these activities to happen as per it's expected. We call it as enablers. Enablers. So enablers is your 5th element, right? We also have one more block which we call it as process control. Process control, which talks about process documentation, process measurement, improvement of the processes. All the stuff will come into that, right? So if you know about the CMMI levels, this is basically comes to CMMI 5 level, right? This is your 6th element. So when you talk about the process, you're talking about trigger, input, workflow or connected activities or procedural step, outputs, enablers, and process control. Right? This is a complete process. You might heard about process improvement or process consultants, like process related projects, right? When you say organization, it is nothing but processes in place with the right people in right positions and the right business model, right? The process is a very important part of any organization. It actually makes a difference between a successful organization and a struggling organization. Right? When you look at a struggling organization, they will have a problem in one of these elements. This is where the process consultants come into picture. They will analyze your current processes. They will see which is missing. Sometimes a trigger is missing. So only trigger is your employee should remember himself and do it. That's not a trigger. A trigger should be clearly defined. Either it's a scheduled one or it's an event-based trigger. All right, that might be a problem. Sometimes you have a very good workflow, but you don't have a defined inputs. Within Skillogic, if you're writing an exam, I don't know if you filled, there is a registration form, exam registration form. Maybe after this PRINCE2 class, you'll be filling that. We have a very clear process of defined input for exam booking. We do not book an exam without you filling the exam registration form, which is an online form in Skillogic website. All right. So we have made sure that you have a clear defined inputs, just like you have a valid check over here. That's also very important. Some organization might have a problem with that. Then they will struggle with work being stuck here and there. And the output should be also going to a very specified entity. If that is not there, again we'll have a land up in a problem, triggering wrong things and giving outputs to a wrong stakeholder, and having the right people in right place, and also the process control. If you can ensure that, I mean, this is what the process consultants do. They will find the map of your processes. They will clearly define it in a there are a lot of tools to actually map the existing processes, and then they will suggest an improvement plan. All right. The improvement plan basically try to address one of the 6 aspects if they are missing in your organization. It's a big money. So process consulting is a huge money. What they do is exactly this. Right. Well, you need a domain knowledge to make the improvement and also identify the 1, 2, 3, 4 where it is missing. But that's all about it. This is a very high level picture about a process. Within PRINCE2 process, we have 7 PRINCE2 processes. I would like you to focus on trigger, input, activities. We call it as activities in PRINCE2, and output. That is good enough. 1, 2, 3, 4. You focus on there. If you can understand and apply or trigger, input, output, workflow of all the 7 processes, you're fantastic. That's more than enough for your PRINCE2 knowledge in terms of with respect to process. All right. Any questions in process general discussion, so that we can jump into PRINCE2 process discussion?
Any examples for enablers in terms of IT?
Sorry.
For enablers, any examples can for IT related?
IT related enablers are nothing but your software developers, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. For example, let's say not only developers. Let's say we're talking about starting up a project. All right, that's one of your processes, right? So enablers are nothing but your project manager who is actually doing this outline business case, and the executive is getting involved in it, right? If you're talking about managing product delivery, which is a 6th process, all right, their team manager agrees the work with the project manager, and then the team manager works with the developers to develop the application and give it back to the project manager. So the team manager himself is an enabler, right? He is a person working at the process, and team manager will have a lot of tools and techniques and planning stuff, whatever. Those are all our enablers. So that is helping the process to actually getting executed as it should.
Okay.
Is that answer your question?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Samir. All right. Let's get into PRINCE2 process. We had a high-level discussion about this flow. I'm going to go again this in a more detailed way. So, mandate is a high-level document, as we know. It contains what is the business case in a very high level. So what I want to achieve, what are the benefits I'm looking for, what is the cost I think I want, I would like to invest, and what's the time frame I have in my mind. This is good enough to become a mandate. Mandate is not a structured document. It could be an email or even a conference call which triggers your PRINCE2 project. This is really different from PMP or any other framework, because for PMP, your complete business case is required as input. Otherwise, we cannot do the project. The business case is created before the project by a different team, a business analyst team or a sales team or a business. They create the business case and give it to you. PMP project only executes and delivers it. It's more on the execution level. Whereas in PRINCE2, we only get a high-level mandate, which are benefits they are looking for, cost and time. That's all. And we create the project business case within the project. The first process, the entire purpose of the first process is to create outline business case. We call it as OBC, which is a kind of like validation how how valid is the project, right? And the output is given to your the next process, which is your directing a project. We also call it as DP, where your board members actually work. Okay, and they will get the input from you starting up a project, look into it. Once they are comfortable that whatever mentioned in the brief or valid and the business case itself looks valid on paper, because all the things you have to do is a rough estimation over here. We are not doing a comprehensive estimation in starting up a project. Right? Based on the input, they will give permission or authorize your next process, which is your initiating a stage process. Initiating a project. Sorry, initiating a project process. IP. Right? So IP, the purpose of the IP is to create a comprehensive documentation for the project. There is no delivery work happening here. See, and this is also your first stage. Starting up a project, we don't consider as a stage. We say it as pre-project. Your first stage is considered from your initiating a stage project. No delivery work being done here. Only documentation work. We create a project plan. We create all the management strategies over here. And then at the end of this fourth stage, which is the initiation stage, there is a fourth process being triggered. This is the first process, this is the second process, this is the third process, and the fourth process we call it as managing stage boundary. Managing stage boundary, or simply known as SB. The purpose of the SB is to create the stage summary and put it in a document called as end stage report, and also create the next stage plan, submit to the board members. All right, and the board members will look into it and see if it is valid, still valid, and everything looks fine. They will authorize your next stage. Now we are talking about fifth process, which is a controlling a stage. This is where project manager bundles the work, gives the work to the team manager. The team manager receives the work from a process called as managing product delivery, also called as MP. All right, and once the work is completed, work is delivered or requested in the form of work package. Once the work package is complete, it's given back to the controlling a stage to the project manager. This is project manager level, this is team manager level, and this is a board level. All right, and again you have a stage boundary because it's the end of the stage. Report submitted to the board members. Once they approve the report, again you start controlling a stage, managing product delivery, goes back. If this happens to be final stage, then you have your seventh process, we call it as closing a project process, CP, and then end of the project. This is a really overview. Now you're going to go very detailed on individual process, starting with the starting up a project. What are the activities, what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and how the activity has been carried out in much more detail. So just to recap, starting up a project, directing a project, initiating a project, managing stage boundary, controlling a stage, managing product delivery, and closing a project. 7 processes. As you can see, 5 processes is actually carried out by your project manager. Directing a project, one process is carried out by your director of the board members basically, and 1 process is in delivery level, which is managing product delivery. Out of the 7, 5 is under project manager, 1 under team managers, and 1 under board members. All right. Any questions here? We should dive into more details. So, do you get an overview? You understand the flow of the PRINCE2 project execution?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so thank you. So